Bulag sa mga mata, ang buhat sa gugma, busa padayon. Ug barug nga maligon, awitig bagong
So hello, this is Edward Johnson from Remnant in Bohol. I have a vision that I got in a dream that I'm going to share today. That's about the Hong Kong situation that's going on right now. God gave me this dream about 12 years ago, and I published it at that time in our journal, the HKI. And I thought that it was about events that were happening back then. So 2009 we had the big the financial problems across the housing, the mortgage problems. And I thought that's what the dream was referring to, but I didn't really track with the dream. Then when I moved away from Hong Kong, on the airplane coming here, he asked me, what about that dream with the wave that destroyed Hong Kong? And I thought, yeah, I guess that didn't even happen. I was already leaving Hong Kong, so I was very confused. So when things began to happen last year with the democracy protest movement, they weren't protesting democracy. They're protesting for freedom, not democracy protests. They're communist protests. But when the riots were happening last year, I felt that this was maybe not coming to pass. The dream, though, there was two waves that were hitting Hong Kong. It wasn't just one, and so I couldn't understand. Is it the underlying the threat of communism, and then the riots that is the effect? What's the one and two problems? But it wasn't until the coronavirus this year, the outbreak, that I realized that, oh yeah, now this is happening. I like to make a disclaimer in my videos here that we're in the Philippines and there's a lot of animals around. Both neighbors have got chickens. You hear the chickens, right? There's chickens in both the front and the back. They aren't right next door, but they're so loud you can hear them for about a mile. And there's a lot of cats and dogs, and there's a lot of things happening in the area. And I can't really edit out all the noises, so I'm sorry if you hear chickens in the video. Just laugh with me, I think. If I can edit it out, I'll edit out a lot of that noise, but otherwise just enjoy the Philippines with me. So, okay, let me share the dream first. It's not a very long dream. So it seemed like as the dream started, there was a warning from God that no one really even knew was a warning. And then number two, that a second warning came up, and the second warning was like, if a typhoon came by, you get very large waves in the ocean. And it was like that kind of huge waves in the ocean. That's a bit dangerous, but it's very noisy and chaotic. And in the dream, a lot of people were down at the beach, and they were just watching these giant waves. And there was a sense that I had, and many of us had, that this was something was wrong here. But there were other people, especially one Christian that I knew who was like a musician. And he was making fun of this, and he got a surfboard and began to surf actually in the waves, just mocking it, making fun of it. And I saw a pastor on the beach, and he said, are any of our people in the waves doing that? And I said, yeah, one of the guys on the worship team is there. And he said, no, get him out of there. And before I did anything, the guy who I'm talking about, he's in the worship team, but he's very talented, but he's kind of not what you would think of. You wouldn't know he's a Christian because he's just really kind of slick and kind of prideful, and he doesn't come off as a Christian. But he's very talented, and he was the person. So maybe there's a personality type there in the vision. I didn't have a chance to warn him. I looked around and the police were coming, and the sense that I have, there was a moral issue in this. So in reality, it's unsafe. The government will tell you don't go down to the ocean during typhoon, but in the dream, it was like there was a morality breach here. So I saw police coming, and I felt like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna get out of here. I don't want to get in trouble with the police, thinking that I'm one breaking the law. So I went around behind this building to get away. And then there was a second scene, and the second scene was another pastor. Now it's the same church that we were going to. And this was the fun pastor. And unfortunately, he was evangelizing, but he was evangelizing only people who were like pretty girls in bikinis at the beach. And it was not really appropriate. I was not really comfortable with what he was doing. But he would say, I'm just reaching out to people who are here, and here I am. but on the ground where he was at, it was just like dead sand that had been trampled down, and it was very kind of dirty, and it was very unfruitful ministry. Okay, so then there was a third scene, and this moment, I was now out in the bay, on a big rock, and I knew where I was, and this was a town called Moiwo. In English we call that place the Silver Mine Bay, and this is actually an old silver mine. But I think that, I mean, the dream, it wasn't the actual bay; it didn't look the same. So I think that it's a symbolic statement of probably the economy. It's the place where you get your silver, the Silver Mine Bay. I don't think it was the actual place, and it was funny because at the time period, I lived on Lantau Island, but not there. That's where the ferry landed, and so we would go through it a lot. But a few years later, actually, I moved to that town. So the next scene that I was in the middle of the bay, like out in the ocean on a rock, and I looked over to my side, and there was another rock with like locals and tourists in it, and I recognized the lady there. Now she is a British national, and she's a drug user, recreational drug user. In the time period, this is like 12 years ago, it was not as common as maybe it is now in the States where everyone's doing that these days, but even 10 years ago, it wasn't that common. And she was just, that was her lifestyle. And she's not Christian. And when I saw her, I realized that she can't swim. And she's in a rock in a very deep water. And I felt concerned for her safety. And I told people, well, look out, be careful, that lady, if she slips and falls in the water, she'll drown. And the people around her said, oh no, she's with her friends are all here, her friends will take care of her. And I looked at them, and I recognized that those friends are not even her friends. They don't even like her. And if she did actually slip and fall, they wouldn't help her at all. That's in the dream, I knew this, that they would not care for her. And so what I saw was a community of people who have a real false sense of their safety and their security. And for whatever their lifestyle is, whatever their personality is, they felt that they were in a good, safe place, but they were not in a safe place. And this becomes maybe more important as the dream goes on. So as I was, worried about my friend, I looked over to my other side, and then I saw coming in from the ocean this wave, and it's not anything normal. First of all, it was a double wave, a wave on top of a wave. Number two, it was, I think, about 150 meters tall on the base, and then another one was about 150 meters tall on the second part of it. When I first wrote this up, I said 150 feet. I wasn't very good at looking at the distance and judging it. And now when I think about it, I think that now it was about 150 meters tall. So combined, about a 300 meter tall wave, double wave. And also it was moving very slowly. And I recognized that it was slow, inching forward, but nothing would stop it. It was coming and nothing could stop that. And the next thing about the wave that was strange was that the bottom wave was like a cliff. It wasn't like water. It was like a giant, like a rocky cliff, like a mountain, but a cliff. And the part on top was a perfectly vertical wedge that was triangular on the back. And I looked at it carefully, and I saw on the very top of it, like I could see waves cresting over the top of it. I saw several waves cresting. The guy gave me a sense of how big it was. It's enormous. So what is this thing? There's this double wave coming. The base is like a mountain, like a rocky cliff. The top is a perfect wedge, perfectly vertical, like unnaturally perfect. In a wedge, and then little waves. It's really big, and the unsafe people, when they saw that, they were like in awe. But if you ever seen videos of people who were like caught in tsunamis, the ocean retreats, and people are surprised, and they run out to see. The beach is all empty by water. The water was empty on the beach, and they run out there to see what's there, and the kids are getting fish, and it's so exciting. They don't realize the danger that they're in. And so it was like that. These people were staring at this thing coming. It's coming. Oh, whoa, look at that. This thing is coming. And it was like no one had any sense that this is dangerous. There was no sense that they're in trouble. Otherwise, they would have left. So I don't know how to say anything to these unsaved people because I can't communicate anything deep truth to them at this point. I just kind of mumbled and fumbled for words. God is just so big. I don't know what to say. And the wave hit us. Now we're underwater, and I noticed a couple different things. First I noticed that everything has to cease functioning, and I saw our ministry name, our old ministry name, that was floating around, and it was still intact, but nothing else can function underwater. It was just like a washing machine, turbulence. So it was an environment that was so adverse that nothing can function normally. But our ministry could. Now our ministry is unusual because we don't have any funding, we don't have any facilities or staff. It's just a couple people, and we just, we do God's will as God tells us to do it. So, if there's no money, well, we normally don't have any money. And so, we can serve God with no money, and that's just how it is. And so other ministries who have income and staff and, big teams and mortgages and different things, they would not be able to function in this environment because their cash flow would stop. That's what it seemed like. And so another thing that was interesting was that I saw a ministry name that had no name. It was a ministry that was a symbol of a slice of fruit, like a lemon slice, like an orange slice, like a lemon slice really. And it was in the water, and it was fine. And I now think that's probably the Holy Spirit's ministry, like the fruit of the Spirit's ministry doesn't stop even in a catastrophe. And no one could put their name on that ministry. It was the Holy Spirit's sovereign ministry. So there was a funny moment there, a transition period, I'm not sure how long that would last, where the environment was so bad that only ministries that were prepared for it could even function during that time period. Okay, then the wave passed, and now I find myself on the shore. And when this happened, when I had the dream, I was living on Lantau Island, but nearby Moi Wo. A couple years later, I moved to Moi Wo, and then I left Hong Kong altogether. Now in the dream, what was strange was that we're in Moi Wo, and my daughter was there, but she wasn't with me. And that confused me for a long time until about 1.5 years ago when we moved to the Philippines, but she moved back to Hong Kong. And she was downtown for a while, but a few months ago she moved back to Moi Wo. So it was an interesting development that she actually right now is not with me. I have talked to her on the phone, and she physically is there and I'm physically here. So in the dream, this is how it unfolded. That she's not with me, but she called me and she asked me, oh, we're safe, we're okay, but we want to go shopping. Can we go shopping now? And so I saw a little store, and I asked the guy in the store, hey, is it okay if we go shopping now? Now he was looking, his place was like upside down. It was like just been like just ransacked. Upside down. Things were knocked over and just upended. And he was at his countertop, and he was looking at it, like his books, like his ledger and his inventory books, and he was holding his head in his hand, and he was just, oh wow, he was just really not doing well. He was very upset, shaking his head in worry. I said, hey, can we do some shopping now in the dream? And the man says, no one can do any shopping right now. Not until 3 or 4 in the afternoon. Or maybe he said 3 or 4 hours later. There's a 3 or 4 reference. So I now look at that and I recognize that if there's any kind of real problem with economic turmoil, retail shops suffer the first, and they really can't maintain an inventory at a certain price, sell at a certain price, and keep things going. It may have to do with something like that. Now he was very clear that no one right now can do any shopping. And 3 or 4 hours, I think that there's a symbol there that it probably would take 3 or 4, probably not days, maybe 3 or 4 weeks before they could get things back to normal. Maybe 3 or 4 months before things normalize truly. So in the vision, it was a 3 or 4 time period before things could be normalized. They could do this shopping again normally. So that was, he said that not until we figure out this mess. So the wave had caused a giant mess. Now, I was looking around that town, and I noticed that people were missing. They weren't. Usually it's a normal town. A lot of people are hanging around, but there's no one there. Houses were gone. It was like it was wiped away, wiped out. And I didn't see dead bodies. I didn't see that kind of aftermath. Like you've seen the images of tsunamis in Banda Aceh and the Boxing Day tsunami. The whole town was just disappeared. It's like there's not even debris in that town. It was just wiped off the face of the earth. So in this case here, it wasn't quite as clear as that. But it was that there was buildings that were missing, people were gone. But then I saw something very funny. I saw a building, and the wall was missing, like it had collapsed. And in the building was a cow and a goat. I think it was a goat. Now I'm not really sure exactly, but I think it was a goat. But definitely it was a cow and a goat. A cow and some small, maybe a goat or a sheep. I think it was a goat though. And I saw that, and later on I felt that that is just so obscure and so weird. I think that's a biblical reference. I could look that up. The last thing in the vision, which was strange, was that I should be panicking, I should be freaking out and worried, but in the dream I was not. I was actually, like, I was deeply liberated. I was set free so much. I wasn't like happy for what was happening, but I personally felt optimism that was so strong. Sorry for the chickens. I felt such a great sense of optimism, opportunity that for now on, for my life, now it's going to be good. And that's basically how the dream ends. Now, we published this in our journal in 2007, and then we had the turbulence 2009, and I thought this was maybe referring to that, but it didn't really track that pattern. And then when I came here, the Lord told me, He mentioned that dream that hadn't happened yet, where I concluded. So I would keep my eyes open. There's going to be something else that's going to happen. There's some kind of a double whammy, two very different problems that were coming at the same time, and they were going to have a bad effect. So what's happened in Hong Kong since then was that last year they've had this democracy movement. It's a protest against communism. Now, communism to the West, you get your news kind of filtered through channels because they really can't tell the truth because otherwise they'll get blocked in this area. So you don't really know how bad it really is. But the truth is, people in China get kidnapped and disappeared every day. One of the most dangerous things you can have in China is a guitar. Because if you think that you're a Christian, you're part of the underground church, you're very likely going to get kidnapped and tortured. And maybe they'll return you after you have been, brainwashed and abused. Maybe they'll never see you again. It's a very dangerous country, actually, to live in. Now, also, I used to work there, and I noticed there was something that was strange that was happening. What I noticed was that the government would always lie. And, we first went to a seminar when I first went there. Now, I'm doing a law program in technology transfers between joint venture companies, the foreign technology holder, local, maybe the factory, and we're doing tech transfer joint venture contracts in China as an area of study for my law degree. And we had a very long lecture with some Communist Party officials, and he went on for a long time about, the Chinese people, is what he said, as a culture, we are averse to gambling. We hate gambling as a culture. We don't gamble. We do not gamble as a culture. Our people, we just don't do it. We hate it. And I never heard that either for or against. I don't know what that means. I don't really know. Later on, like that week, I saw men cooking eggs together like this. And what are they doing? Oh, they're betting on whose egg's going to break first. And they had crickets. They're betting on crickets. They're cricket fights. And they're betting on all these strange things. And I thought that, the truth is the people gamble a lot. And of course, you go to Hong Kong and Happy Valley, the racetrack. You can actually, then you've got Macau. Macau is the gambling center of China, and it's crazy gambling. So, it's not the truth of what I was told by the government officials. They're embarrassed for their vices. So their habit is to lie about it, and lie about it in the extreme, in the opposite way. So we also noticed that the AIDS epidemic in China, what they'll tell you is that, there's no AIDS in China. We don't have AIDS here. Okay, we have a couple, like 1 million people maybe. When the reality is, when that was being spoken about, they probably have at least 10 million cases at that time when they were saying that. So the patterns that I saw in the Chinese press, they will openly lie about things that are embarrassing. And number two, that they will often either magnify or reduce a fact by at least a factor of maybe 10 or 20 to hide what's embarrassing to them. So the democracy movement, first of all, is one problem. And Hong Kong is not going to be safe in 25 years if the communist government doesn't change. If they don't just let Hong Kong be free and be as it is for the next 100 years, just let it be as it is, they're very likely to, imprison half the country, and force them all through education, and then just import people from the mainland and live in Hong Kong. That's what they'll do that. And so Hong Kong people right now, they know their lives are in danger. And so their protests are maybe a little bit of a strange tactic. Maybe that's not really going to work. But a lot of Christians are there. About 1 million Christians are there. And it's crazy violence. That I don't like their riots, but they are desperate trying to get their voice heard. But the next problem that we're having is this coronavirus. Now, I lived through SARS. I was in Hong Kong during SARS, and I had a magazine for lawyers, and then I lost it. My partners took it. Really, I couldn't fix it. I couldn't get it back. And then I had no job for a while. I had to go take a very low-paying teacher's job in a government school. And it was very far away, and it was very stressful at first. And then I got used to it, and I began to enjoy my new job. And in November of the school year, I saw one of my colleagues with a newspaper from China, and the girl was holding a giant, big bag of dirty water. And I asked my colleague, what is that on the front page for? Why is that the front page story of this paper from China? And she said, oh, well, there's a virus in China that's happening. This is November. There's a virus that's happening in China, and it's very, very serious. And they told people that the cure is vinegar. So there's suddenly no vinegar in China you can buy. It's all gone. So then people started telling them that the cure is if you take your rice and you wash your rice, the dirty rice wash water, if you drink that water, then that will be a cure for you. And people were actually in the marketplace selling dirty rice water. Now you can imagine how dirty rice is. So the problem of misinformation, when people are panicking because they think they're going to die of a virus, is very serious. And so people were actually on the street selling dirty rice water as a cure. Now this was November. Now we had December, we had holiday break, and then January back to school. And at this point, still, there was not any news at all in the Western or in the English media about what was happening in China. It's already been 2 or 3 months. Finally, there was a guy in Hong Kong. He went to China for business, and he came back sick, and he just died. And then people started saying, "Oh, you know what? There's actually a virus in China that's an outbreak right now," but no one knew it. And so it spent many months just getting worse and worse and worse. People in Hong Kong began to get the virus, and one problem was that a nurse got it one day. She got it, and then in 24 hours she died of it. It was that serious. Death toll in Hong Kong wasn't that many, but it shut the city down. I was working in a school, and one of my students in my school was one of the first school kids in town to get pneumonia during that crisis. Now, luckily, it wasn't SARS pneumonia. It was actually just regular pneumonia, which is still lethal sometimes, fatal sometimes. But when that happened, the government just closed every school down, and I had a paid vacation for more than 6 weeks. So I was thankful that I had suddenly realized I have a good government job, even though the pay isn't that great. I didn't lose my job. I still got paid. A lot of my friends lost their jobs. And our friends were in the airline industry. We lived in a little village of all airline staff, and they had no work for a long time. The pilots, the flight attendants, other people, administration, people were hurting. It was a hard time. And it was strange also that SARS, they call it SARS. Hong Kong is called the SAR, so they named it so it would sound like where it came from, SARS. But actually it came from China, actually. So SARS was also funny because the effect that it had on the city, first of all, was very painful. But there were other things that happened that were great. There were benefits. I remember before this happened, walking down the street to work one day, and a guy from mainland China, you can tell by the kind of way he dressed and the way he looked. He looks a little bit different than people in Hong Kong. And he walked toward me in the street, and then he sneezed right at me, on me. And I walked through a cloud of his sneeze. And I just remember just being so covered in his sneeze. And Hong Kong people before, especially in China, there's no real idea of hygiene and viruses and that kind of stuff. People would just, they're not very clean in their hygiene, in that way. When SARS hit, people were panicking in fear about their hygiene, and they suddenly stopped sneezing in public, stopped jumping. If you were sick in Hong Kong, nowadays you see the mask, right? It began then. You wear a mask if you were sick. You don't go to work anymore if you're sick. It changed work habits. It changed so many things. And also that time period, I asked God. I asked God about SARS effect, and there were good effects that SARS gave to Hong Kong. But one thing that God told me about SARS in Hong Kong was that SARS was a preparation for Hong Kong. And I asked God, that doesn't make any sense. It was a horrible crisis. It's a global outbreak, and people died. And if 300 deaths is a preparation, what is it a preparation for? So now we are in today's situation. I'm also in the Philippines now, and we have a problem with China. They took a bunch of our islands in the sea, and we're praying for that because they've now brought in a lot of fishing boats and just taken all the fish off the reefs, and they want to claim the oil there, which is in the Philippine territory. The Philippines got no real army, no navy, so they can't really help anybody to defend themselves. So I asked the Lord, what to do about this, and God told me He will not let China take the islands from the Philippines. He told me that a couple times. And then Anne was praying, and God told Anne that God was going to break the Great Wall of China. Now, I don't know what that really means. The Great Wall of China is, some kind of symbolism there, that God was going to stop China from trying to take over all of this Southeast Asia. So there's a context maybe to what's happening. Now, also, when I was in China, I noticed some funny things. I noticed that I mentioned before about the gambling, and I noticed that news in China is reported is a factor that is usually off. If it's important, it's off by a factor of 10 or 20 above or below. But also that you don't really know what's happening because they won't tell you the truth. So you have to look at other indicators to find out what's really happening. Like one researcher was hearing that China's GDP was up this year, that year, but he saw that water consumption had reduced and so had power consumption. And he said that it's not possible that GDP would increase at the same time that water and power use would decrease. That isn't a possibility. That the GDP increase is always matched with an increase of power and water consumption. So the other indicators, secondary indicators, that you look at to see what's really happening will tell you the truth, even you can't trust the actual media. So the coronavirus is a little bit worrisome because the Chinese were saying that they'd had 300 deaths in January, but they were freaking out, and they closed the entire city of Wuhan for 300 deaths. It's a bit of an overreaction. And they mentioned they had a few thousand cases. But then at one point there was a government-approved news agency that accidentally published the actual figures of the virus about a month ago from today. It's February 26, 2020. So this was about a month ago. And they published that actually by that day there was 25,000 deaths, 157,000 confirmed cases, and 60 or 80,000 other known but non-tested cases. So at that day, about a month ago, they were claiming 300 deaths, and there was actually 25,000. Okay. Now, I know that Western people are always saying that, okay, the numbers are official figures, are not real, we don't know what the real figures are. If people were reporting that the death toll was that 80 times worse than what is being reported, people would panic. I'm not sure they should panic, but it's different when people think the virus is only less harmful than the seasonal flu. It's actually very serious right now. And so that's what is an underlying issue with the coronavirus. So I'm in the day I'm in right now. Today is February 26th, and I had this dream about 12 years ago or more, 13 years ago, and I felt last year when the protests were happening. I called my daughter in Hong Kong. I said, I had this dream, and God told me it'd be wise just to have food for a month on hand, just as a precaution. Don't panic. Don't tell people that, they'll freak out, but it's wise to have food on hand. God told me that. So I asked her, just get you a month of food in hand just in case you had a problem. And the riots were not that bad. I mean, they're bad, but they don't stop the whole city from functioning. But then when the virus hit, suddenly the store shelves are empty for a lot of commodities. But it hasn't quite peaked yet. So I think last year I was hearing about the protests, and I thought, okay, I saw a double wave, so maybe this is communism is one part and the protest is the other part of it. Why is it two waves? I don't really understand it. But now with the coronavirus hitting, I recognize this is two separate, unrelated, but overlapping issues. And the effect that I saw was that Hong Kong was basically wiped out. Now this bothers me because one of God's main promises to me, one of His instructions to me, was to make a certain kind of a company to grow things in the Philippines and sell it to Hong Kong at a high value and earn money to fund the revival here. And if Hong Kong is wiped out, then how can that plan come to pass? And so I have a lot of questions in the prophetic, lineage of how these things line up. Maybe that God's word for me is years off. Maybe that it won't be the effect that I fear. But I also want to share this last part of the vision. I saw a cow and a goat. Okay, this is what maybe ties it all together. Now, a cow and a goat, I knew this must be a biblical reference somehow, so I got out the search program to look in the Bible for a verse about a cow and a goat, and I found two verses, and this is very, very interesting. So the first verse is Psalm 50, Now Psalm 50 is God saying, you know what? I don't need what you're giving me. I don't need your stuff. I don't need your sacrifices. I don't need your cow and your goat. I own everything. I make everything. Everything belongs to me. You don't need to give me a cow and a goat. I don't need that. But in verse 15 it says that what I want is that when you get into a crisis, day of calamity hits you, when you get into to distress, call on me, and I'll help you, and then testify what I did. And so the sacrifices of God, we say that it's a contrite heart, it's a broken spirit. He won't despise that. Well, he wants to work with us. Now the crisis is the opportunity for God to show His salvation in a real world situation. So Psalm 50, if this is the reference of this vision, there's going to be a day of distress. There's going to be a crisis. And in that, God's going to be available to those who call on Him to rescue them, and they will float what everyone else thinks, or whatever metaphor you want. So Psalm 50, verse 15 is kind of the key reference, I think, to this cow and the goat. But the other reference is similar. It's in Isaiah 7. And Isaiah 7 is one that I remember first. And it says this, it's, after I destroy your city, the people who remain there are going to have so much milk from their cow and their goat, they're going to have yogurt. I'm paraphrasing, that's not really exactly the word for word, but this is how it says in verse from 21 to 25. That remnant in the land who are left after the catastrophe, they're going to have so much milk, they're going to have curd, they're going to have yogurt. But you used to farm in areas that now you won't go there without a bow and an arrow. It's going to be dangerous. You're going to basically hunt there, then where you farm now. So if you can imagine an area being cultivated and kind of being civilized and being safe, it gets so overwhelmed because there's no one to take care of it, it becomes wild and a bit dangerous. And so the idea there is that the land's going to become wild and dangerous because no people there to take care of it. And so I paraphrase this by saying that you're going to hunt where you used to farm. And however, the underlying idea of this verse in Isaiah 7 is that it's the remnant who get a blessing. They're going to have an abundance of things because there's no one there to take the competition's over. So how does that apply to a catastrophe in a major city? If everyone leaves and if you guys stay, the guys who stay may end up with a promotion, better contract, a bigger house for lower rent. So, okay, I can understand logically how that may play out. I'm not trying to speculate on that part of it, but the verse to me, I can see how it applies. Now, Tracy Cook this year had a word for 2020, and what God showed him was that the first 4 months of this year are going to be crazy. He said it's going to be scary, it's going to be very, very frightening, a lot of chaos and turmoil. And what God told him was that it's your chance right now to find God in the secret place, to trust Him above circumstances, to get the peace in your heart. And that the verse from Isaiah 26, that God's going to keep in perfect peace people whose mind is fixed upon God because they trust in God. Now, it doesn't mean that God will stop the crisis around them. That may continue. But these people will have peace in their heart in the midst of the crisis. And this is important. What God told me last year when I was praying for the Hong Kong demonstrations, God told me, warn people this, do not panic and follow the panicking crowds. You must keep a level head. Because if they panic and they start to run, do not run with them because they are never doing the right thing. And so we need to make sure we understand. If everyone says, oh no, we have to run. Well, okay, you may run, but ask God, should I run? And God will say, yeah, run, then you run. If God says, do not run right now, don't run, stand your ground. That is a very important moment not to run. So we must be people right now who take our direction, especially when we're scared and especially in a crisis, from the Holy Spirit's direction. What should I do right now? If He says just wait it out. It's gonna blow over. Even this virus, even communism. I'm not sure what's coming. So the verse is Isaiah 26. You keep in perfect peace whose mind is stayed upon you because they trust in you. Trust in the Lord forever. The Lord God is an everlasting rock. So I'm not trying to speculate about merge current events and prophecy because people do that, but I find it very thin. I didn't want to share this for a long time, but I felt this week God told me to share this. And so, yeah, I saw this about 12 years ago. Well, it was 2007 when I saw this. Double wave of trouble coming to Hong Kong. When it passes, a remnant will be okay. but it's gonna cause a lot of hardship to a lot of people in the meantime. So don't panic, but be wise. Ask God what to do, and even God says something crazy to do. If God says it, then you should do it. That's your direction. So I hope that blesses you. Now I published this a long time ago. I have a link in the description of a PDF file if you need it. And just keep praying. And if you have any comments, if God told you anything specific about this event or this season, please share it with me, and I'll incorporate it into what I'm sharing. We prophesy in part, and sometimes that 3 or 4 of us together get the one big picture. It's not common one person gets the whole picture. So if you have anything that you can share that's specific, insightful, then tell me. I'll incorporate it. I'll share it. And that's all I'm going to share today. Sorry for the chickens. They are always happy to be on TV. And that's it. So hope to see you next time, and God bless.